Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a little bit of a look, or should I say, continue taking a little bit of a look at the complete history of the Pokemon trading card game. We have reached as far as Roaring Skies. And one thing I really appreciate now, we're at that stage where every set I make, I get a bunch of messages from people being like, that's the set where I started playing. We are getting shockingly recent, ladies and gentlemen, although it's still a little bit old, because this set was released in Japan on March the 14th, 2015, and followed a couple months later in English on May the 6th, 2015. So, I don't know, not a huge gap there. That was alright. Now, this was very much a continuation of Primal Clash, in that what we saw here was another set with leanings very much towards the remakes of Gen 3, though it was still very much a Gen 6 set, and we saw Ancient Traits were still here. But we had new Ancient Traits. Ancient Traits were weird. They were shared between a bunch of Pokemon, but they changed set to set. So, in this set, there were only two Ancient Traits we saw. There was Delta Plus, we can see on Pokemon like Articuno. Meant if you took a KO, you took an extra prize card. No, none of them had great attacks, but ones like Articuno saw a whole bunch of play. And then we had Delta Evolution, seen on stuff like Mega Rayquaza, which again saw a whole bunch of play, because that let you evolve straight away. None of that waiting a turn malarkey. No. You just got to evolve straight away. Now, we did see a whole bunch of new Pokemon EX and new Mega Pokemon EX, most of which got full art equivalents, but we did see a Dragon Rayquaza EX and Mega Rayquaza EX that didn't have a full art equivalent. And that's because, as we've seen so many times before, they came in a separate deck over in Japan. And it really was as simple as that. They were included in the Mega Rayquaza EX Mega Battle deck over in Japan. And those decks generally come with regular versions of the cards, not full art versions. Therefore, when we get them in English, we are suspiciously missing the full art versions of those cards. Except, it's not terribly suspicious. We never expected to see them because they don't exist. And we talked about this before, but just as a quick side note, anytime a card is missing any kind of secret rare version, it is almost guaranteed that the reason for that is because it was released in some random deck in Japan and never got that secret rare version. But in terms of Pokemon EXs that did get those versions, we saw Thunderous EX, that was unfortunately never particularly good. We saw Gallade EX, which was never particularly good. We saw Latios EX, which could do 40 damage on your first turn going first. You couldn't attack going first at the time. That was actually extremely cool. Plus, it prevented all effective attacks other than damage, which was quite nice. That was a cool card. Saw a bunch of play. There was Hydreigon EX, which did have a nice little ability that reduced the retreat cost of your dragon Pokemon by 2 colorless energy, if there is any stadium in play. That was kind of fun. We saw colorless Rayquaza EX, which when we get to the Mega in a minute, that will be pretty gosh darned amazing. And then we saw Shaymin EX, which is one of the greatest cards that's ever been printed. As I record this in January 2022, Shaymin is actually banned in the expanded format for literally being too good. We then had some new Megas to go with them. We had Mega Gallade EX, which was... I mean, look, it did do extra damage to bench Pokemon with any damage on, but it was never a really good card. Mega Latios EX, that did 120 to one of your opponent's Pokemon, which was actually pretty good and saw some play. And Mega Rayquaza EX, which, as we'll see in a minute, was absolutely great. Incidentally, the Dragon Rayquaza and Mega Rayquaza wasn't a particularly good combo. It was very much the colorless one that everybody loved and thought was good. People tried to make the Dragon Mega Rayquaza work, because it could do 300 damage, but the 5 energy really did bury it. People played it and every so often had a bit of success with it, but it never really worked. Now, we did see a couple of full art supporters coming along in this set, with both Wally and Winona, both of which are very relevant and we will be talking about in a moment. And we also saw that we had gold cards in the form of Energy Switch and Versus Seeker. And Versus Seeker was especially relevant because there came a point where every other version of Versus Seeker rotated out, except the gold version in Roaring Skies. So this secret rare gold version was actually super relevant because it kept it in the format, and Versus Seeker is a phenomenal card. So this ended up being a huge deal. The pre-release promo was Altaria, which was a really cool card we are going to mention in a moment, and it is kind of cool that it's only 10 sets, I believe, since we got the Altaria pre-release promo from Dragons Exalted, so apparently Altaria suits pre-release promos? I don't know, seems to work. Now, the most expensive card in the set is your full art secret rare, call it what you will, of Mega Rayquaza, the colourless one, but it only comes in at like $45. It's not a particularly expensive card, but Mega Rayquaza is still relevant in Expanded. It's not amazing, let's be clear, but it's kind of cool. It's a nice little card, and you know, everybody loves Rayquaza. And in terms of theme decks, we did have two. We had Aurora Blast and Storm Rider. Aurora Blast featured Articuno. Unfortunately, not the really good Articuno that had the ancient trait. The bad Articuno. There was a bad Articuno and a good Articuno in the set. Unfortunately, this was the one we didn't particularly want. Sorry about that. But you can see from the box, it's clearly the wrong Articuno. Gutted, I suppose. And we also saw rare versions of Victini, Salamence, and Swellow. And both the Salamence and Swellow non-holos were exclusive to the deck. They were holo in the set only, which is really kind of cool. And I should mention the holo version of Articuno was exclusive. It was a non-holo in the set proper. As for Storm Rider, that was your Zapdos theme deck, and obviously the holo version of Zapdos again was exclusive to the deck, and we saw non-holo rares of Shedinja, Skarmory, and Dragonite, and the non-holo Dragonite was exclusive to the deck. It was a holo in the set, so that's kind of cool. In terms of the best cards, this was a set that had lots of very good cards. But I mean, the best one, Shaymin, and that shouldn't really surprise anyone. Shaymin is absolutely ridiculous. You play it from your hand to your bench, you draw till you have 6 cards in your hand. It wasn't limited to having 1 per turn. Like, as many Shaymin as you could play, that's how many Shaymin you got to use, and it was absolutely ridiculous. It became a staple in, like, every deck. Basically every deck, unless you had a real need to not play 2-prize Pokemon or you had some other specialized draw engine, this was just an absolute staple. It was absolutely ridiculous. Very much one of the greatest cards that's ever been printed. And especially good with Mega Rayquaza. And it really did seem like this entire set was made to make Mega Rayquaza good. 3 energy, 30 damage for each of your bench Pokemon, but we had the card Skyfield, which said that you could have 8 bench Pokemon. So with a full bench you do 240 damage, which was enough to KO even Mega Pokemon in 1 hit at the time. It was absolutely ridiculous. But you could get this going from nothing straight away, because you had Delta Evolution, so you could evolve straight into it. And of course we had Rayquaza Spirit Link, so you didn't need to end your turn to evolve. So you could evolve straight away, and you wouldn't end your turn by doing so, which is a little bit nuts. Obviously we had double colorless energy at the time, and although we needed a 3rd energy, this set gave us the card Mega Turbo, which allows you to attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Mega Evolution Pokemon. Now, it must be borne in mind, Mega Turbo was not just a card for Rayquaza. We're talking about it here because that's where it's relevant, but the vast majority of Mega EX decks that we ever saw they all ended up playing Mega Turbo, at least the vast majority of them did. It really was an absolutely ridiculous card, but certainly here it was particularly good. So that could get you evolved up and having all free energy on straight away. Plus, of course, you had Shaymin to draw you extra cards. So it wasn't just that Skyfield gave you more bench space, it was that you used that bench space for Shaymin to go nuts and draw a huge amount of cards. We even had the Altaria, which took away your weakness, and also had Delta Evolution, so you could evolve that up straight away. And just in case all of that wasn't good enough, we also had the aforementioned Winona, which let you search your deck for up to 3 colourless Pokemon and put them into your hand. Like, for instance, Rayquaza, Mega Rayquaza and Shaymin, and Shaymin would draw you cards. So like we say quite often, yes, you're giving up your supporter for the turn to draw by playing Winona, but because Winona gets you your draw engine in terms of Shaymin, it really didn't matter. It really was absolutely ridiculous. And it does feel like all of this was just made. The card designers were like, hey, play Rayquaza. Play Rayquaza. It really was very, very good. Now, Articuno and Natu were your go-to Delta Plus cards. Like I've said, they weren't absolutely stunning, but they did see a bit of play. Now, make no mistake, Articuno was the best among them. 3 water energy, 20 damage, flip 3 coins, 40 more for each heads. Yes, it was expensive, although we had Blastoise at the time, so this fit very nicely into Blastoise decks and was a really good tech in Blastoise decks, made the energy less of a problem. And it was flippy, and you didn't always do that much damage, but against evolving Pokemon or in decks that had very weak Pokemon, this was actually really legitimately good for helping you jump ahead in the prize race. Natu saw a bit of play here and there, it wasn't as good, but 2 energy, 10 damage, times the amount of energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, and although it was 2 energy, it was 1 energy when you reminded yourself that Dimension Valley was a thing. So, not an amazing card by any stretch, but again, that ancient trait was so good that if the cards were good, it would have broken the game. They had to be a bit rubbish, and even then they actually saw play. Now, Bayonet also had Delta Evolution, let you evolve straight into it, and it had the attack, somewhat ironically, Evolution Jammer. For a single Psychic Energy you did 20 damage, and your opponent couldn't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their Pokemon during their next turn. So the theory essentially is, you go second, your opponent has only had 1 turn, so can't have evolved other than with something like Delta Evolution, and then you would start using Evolution Jammer, and you wouldn't do much damage, but because your opponent wouldn't be able to evolve, they basically wouldn't be able to attack, and you'd win the game from there. Was also fun to note there was another Bayonet in the set as well, which just turned off Pokemon tools for both players. The tools were still there, they just didn't actually do anything. Fun little tech for the odd deck. Now, Togekiss was a fun card. Again, it had Delta Evolution, and when you played it from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you looked at the top 8 cards of your deck, chose any basic energy you found, and attached them to your Pokemon in any way that you liked. We are not talking about some absolute staple. Let's face it, it was a Stage 2, and interesting to note, as well as being a Stage 2, the Stage 1 didn't have Delta Evolution, so you still had to wait a turn to do it. But fun little rogue decks trying to get lots of energy on the board all in one go? Yeah, they absolutely loved Togekiss. Now, Absol was a cool card that did see quite a lot of play, because it had the ability Cursed Eyes. Let you move 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another when you played it. But it was a basic Pokemon, so you would often see this teched into decks, and essentially you would just drop it at the right time, just to move 1 to 3 damage counters, but that would then actually be enough to go and get a KO out of the blue that your opponent wasn't expecting. It was extremely cool. Now, Shedinja was an extremely weird card, because it had a nice little attack for a colourless energy, the wonderfully named Hopeless Scream, that did 50 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. Now, of course, this had 30 HP, so the amount of damage you could do was extremely low. What you really needed was a Pokemon that could copy this attack, but had a bit more HP to be able to use when they did so. What Pokemon could we possibly be using to copy attacks? And the answer is basically always Mew. In Dragons Exalted, we got Mew EX, which could copy the attacks of any Pokemon in play, yours and your opponent's. So this was actually kind of fun. People would use this to just get huge outrage attacks going with Mew. It was really kind of fun. Again, we're not talking about some kind of like amazing top tier thing that was ruling the game and winning every tournament, but this was a really fun thing that people were playing around with, and it was just a fun little combo. Shedinja was fun. Now, the Zapdos in the set wasn't great, but what the Zapdos in the set did have was a resistance to fighting and an attack that wasn't completely terrible. So Zapdos ended up seeing play in some lightning decks purely because whereas the majority of your deck was weak to lightning, this would have a resistance. It saw a bit of play here and there, it got teched in. Now, Latios and Mega Latios were extremely fun decks. Because, Latios, we all tried to donk with Latios, let's be clear. We all tried to donk with Latios. Single energy, 40 damage, you can use it on your first turn going first. There were Pokemon with less HP around. This was something people tried to do. I tried to do it lows. Didn't always work, but it was fun trying, ladies and gentlemen. It was a lot of fun trying. And we will, in a moment, get to a Latios deck that was pretty good. As much as Latios, the Mega version, was also kind of fun, could do 120 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, gee whiz, that also included Shaymin. Those decks were never quite as good, unfortunately, although fun and saw play. Hydreigon, as I told you earlier, reduced the retreat cost of Dragon Pokemon by 2 while there was a stadium in play, and we're not talking about some phenomenal game-breaking thing here, but it was a cool card that saw play in some decks for that reason. Now, Reshiram was kind of a fun one. It had the ability Turbo Blaze that let you, if it was active, attach a fire energy from your hand to one of your Dragon Pokemon, and it never proved to be quite as good as we might have hoped. But it did see some play. There was a while after this set came out, a lot of people were convinced that the Dragon Mega Rayquaza could actually work with Turbo Blaze Reshiram, because you could switch between and potentially get 2 or 3 Reshiram, maybe even 4, attaching 2 or 3 fire energy, maybe even 4, and really getting you set up. But those decks were too gimmicky and too inconsistent, and as fun as they were, they never ended up being good. And then there was a weird Executor, which I've got to give a little bit of a shout out to here, because for a single grass energy, you did 20 damage for each of your opponent's colourless Pokemon in play, which when you look at the whole Rayquaza thing, was actually kind of funky. Incidentally, you've got to love the artwork with all the colourless birds running around. That is kind of awesome. Yes, I know they're flying, but in the TCG, they're colourless, ladies and gentlemen. They be colourless. Now, in terms of trainers here, I must start off with an apology. Trainers Mail remains one of my biggest misses when predicting Pokemon TCG cards. It let you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you could find any trainer and put it into your hand. And when this was revealed on the podcast, back when I used to do that regular, I told you that this was not a particularly good card, and that people were not going to find space for it, and it was never going to work. Boy, howdy was I wrong about that. Yeah, this saw a ridiculous amount of play in a ridiculous amount of decks. That was a big miss for me. Now, Steven was a card that didn't look great on the face of it, search for a supporter in a basic energy, but it actually ended up being really good in Primal Groudon decks, because honestly, Primal Groudon for a lot of the early game, you really just wanted to wall and sit on the bench attaching energy. And Steven made sure you always had your energy. And actually, that was good enough. Wally was not good enough, Wally was too good. It let you evolve your Pokemon straight away using your supporter card. Problem was, it broke the rules of evolution. And when combined with the Trevenant from X and Y, it would basically allow you to turn 1 before your opponent had a chance to do anything. You could evolve up using Wally and item lock your opponent, so they were item locked for the whole game. Wally remains banned and expanded, very much like Shaymin, incidentally, just because it ruins the game. Now, Wide Lens was a fun little card. It meant that when you hit the bench, you could also hit for weakness. There were some really fun little decks that used that. It never really became a staple in top decks, but I had some great fun getting KO with Wide Lens, and I know I'm not the only one. And the final card we need to shout out here is the card that I miss the most, and I think a lot of other people do as well, from this set at least. It's Double Dragon Energy. 2 of any energy when attached to a dragon Pokemon. Just today, the day I record this, we had officially revealed over in Japan the new Garchomp from, well, what's going to be Brilliant Stars over here, Starbirth in Japan. And I look at that and I'm just like, oh, 1 water, 1 fighting energy. Man, I wish we still had Double Dragon Energy, and that's being released in the year 2022, 7 years after Roaring Skies. I don't know why Double Dragon Energy's never been reprinted, because frankly, Dragon, partly because of their attack cost, are just not good, hardly ever. We need Double Dragon Energy back, gosh darn it. We really need it back. Now, in terms of top decks, it really is all about Rayquaza. And there weren't really any real top decks coming out of this set other than the aforementioned Rayquaza. Sure, the Dragon Rayquaza with Reshiram was a fun little deck which people played around with, and I did go to some tournaments where it top cut, but it really wasn't all that in a bag of chips. It was colourless Rayquaza. Now, initially, the list we all played, and the list everyone assumed was going to be the best, was, well, the full colourless list, using Mega Turbo for the extra energy, and Skyfield to get extra bench Pokemon, Shaymin as a draw engine, etc. But that's not actually what showed up. When you got to Worlds and US Nationals, etc., that version was kind of absent. Although I do need to give a shout out to the lovely Freya Pierce, who did get, I believe, 9th place at Worlds 2017 using Mega Rayquaza. So, I mean, you know, let's be clear, Mega Rayquaza was around. But initially, in 2015, the list that did quite well was Rayquaza with Bronzong. Now, this is the Bronzong from Phantom Forces, the one that let you accelerate Metal Energy. And because you played Bronzong, it let you play around with cards like Aegislash, which would block any cards that use special energy. So against things like Night March, for instance, which was honestly everywhere and a gigantic pain, something like that could be very, very good indeed. Either way, it really was, you know, make no mistake about it, it was Rayquaza that was a real winner coming out of this set. And like I say, when you notice that Freya went and got top 16 at Worlds in 2017, this deck was around for a while, and it really was a bit of a powerhouse. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, that was Roaring Skies. It really was the Shaymin and Rayquaza set, but there was a lot of other very cool stuff in there as well, and you saw things like Latios and Articuno, slightly weirder, not necessarily making decks around them, but certainly cool cards that saw a bunch of play and a bunch of love. But now it's over to you guys. I want to know your memories of playing with Roaring Skies if you did, and if you didn't play with Roaring Skies, I want to know your thoughts on the set now that you're seeing it for, well, the first time. So let me know in the comment section, would you? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.